This morning, we will start out with asking the secretary to call the roll. The meeting is called to order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Shank. Chair Richards,
Here.
Director Camacho, Vice Chair Miller,
Here.
Assembly Member Arembula, Director Perea.
Here.
T. Director Escutia,
Here.
Director Williams,
Here.
Senator Gonzalez, Director Cohen.
Here.
Mr. Director, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. And if we could ask Director Camacho if you would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Ernie. Ladies and gentlemen, before we move into public comment and you get the background on what you need to do in order to address us today. First of all, it's great to have all 9 members in one place at one time, and it's not on tiny little screens. So this is great. I hope the new beginning. I wanted to mention something that happened a Saturday before last, and Director Perea and I were there, but for some board members who weren't here at the time, when we were involved in litigation with Kings County years ago on environmental and other issues, we worked towards a resolution which included mitigation. And in terms of, we had an interest in how the money was going to be used for mitigation. This is environmental mitigation and other things. And so I was contacted by one of the members of the Board of Supervisors, who is a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. And at the time he was a member. Today, he's the chairman of the board. His name is Richard Valley. Anyway, Richard called and said, you know, I would wonder if high-speed rail would support the use of some of the mitigation for an idea that we have for one of the small towns in his district. He told me about it, and I talked with our chair, and the chair was talking to the chair of Kings County Board of Supervisors, and ultimately an agreement was struck. And that agreement was that $1 million of mitigation would be used to develop and build a Veterans Memorial in a new park in Corcoran, California. Corcoran is like, it's what you dream about with an all-American town. A lot of underserved people, that's not what you dream about, but people who have great pride in their community and pride in being a citizen of the United States of America. And interestingly also, but not surprisingly, a large number of veterans in Corcoran, California. So 2 Saturdays ago, Director Perea and I were there while they opened and commemorated the Veterans Memorial, which is called 5 Pillars of Freedom. It was amazing. And Richard Valley had a stunning list of veterans who spoke. What they did with this money is something that each and every one of us here can be very proud of. And what we did for that community touches your heart. So I put in front of each of you these commemorative coins, which I hope you would realize how important they are to the people who were responsible for putting it together. But and Richard Valley was a prince, if anything. At the end, by the way, were 2 F-15, I don't know which following designation, from Lemoore Naval Air Station that overflew it. And Weren't they 15s? Well, okay, go ahead. What were they, Henry? At any rate, they were amazing. And it went so incredibly well. I don't know if you want to add anything, any more to it, but they've got great leadership. Not only that, but with Vice Mayor Nolan, whose husband recently passed away and who was a veteran. This was a mission of hers also. So for all of us on this board, there are lots of things to be proud of. This is something that you can be very, very proud of. So anyway, thank you. So beyond that, we will, I'm going to announce, I had hoped to have a conversation briefly with the members on the Finance and Audit Committee. As you noted, we put the board meeting first today. What I would like to do, with your permission, if you, is that we will not have a Finance and Audit meeting, but what I will do is I'll just present the high points that I'd gone through and you've all seen in the packages you've got. So rather than having that after this meeting in closed session, we will convene the next Finance and Audit meeting next month. Is that acceptable? We got two, Jim? Okay, great. Okay, with that then, we will turn to public comment, and Mr. Secretary, please allow our visitors and guests to know what they need to do to address us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Before we begin public comment, for the California High-Speed Rail Board of Directors meeting, I would like to go over some important information. For members of the public who've joined us in person and wish to provide public comment, you will be called upon in the order that we've received your card. If you are joining us via Zoom and wish to provide public comment, please use the raise your hand feature located at the bottom of your screen. Or if you are dialing in by phone, pressing the number 2 will raise your hand and put you into our queue. Speakers will be called upon in the order their hands are raised. Once you are in the queue, your name will be called. Please click the prompt on your screen to allow your microphone to be unmuted. If you are joining by phone, we will call upon you on the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, you will hear a message that you are being unmuted. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes to speak. I will remind you when you have 15 seconds remaining. When it is your turn to speak, please slowly and clearly say your first and last name, and if applicable, state the organization you are representing. Mr. Chair, we will begin with the in-person speakers. Our first speaker is Roland LeBron.
Good morning, Chair Richards, members. Pretty nice to be back with you in person. And thank you for the segue, because what I want to talk about is resolution through mitigation. I'm looking at your item number G today. These are your closed session items. And believe it or not, what is most remarkable is what's missing. I'm not seeing a single lawsuit between San Jose and Merced. And the reason why that happened is that 5.5.
Mr. LeBron, are you able to speak a little bit closer to you?
Is that better?
That's much better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that 5 years ago, I was able to meet with Mr. Roy Hill, and we discussed the situation between San Jose and Gilroy. And you were headed facing massive lawsuits from both cities, which are about to be destroyed by high-speed rail. The eventual outcome was alternative 4. This is what we got in 2018 business plan. And the mayor of Gilroy actually came over and thanked you for that alignment. The reason I'm approaching you today is that you've got 4 lawsuits in the peninsula. You got 2 from Millbrae and another 2 from Brisbane. And with your permission, I'm reaching out to you to schedule a meeting with Foster and Partners and Arab to discuss alternative designs for Millbrae with an objective of actually improving the station as it stands now. And also resolve the situation in
15
Brisbane.
seconds.
Arab is essential in this conversation because they were the designer for the Temple Mills Depot, which is 7 miles east of St. Pancras. And then no, they don't need half of the Bay Lands to get the job done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. LeBron.
Our next speaker is David Schwagel.
Good morning, Mr. Swagel.
Good morning, board members, and outstanding support to the board members as well. Let me see if I can get through to Joe Biden. Can you hear that?
You can only get text at this number, but if you want to call the White House, it's 202-456-1414. 202-456-1414. Looking forward to hearing from you.
You got that down? So you need to go through Joe Biden to get a tour of the White House. And you also have to go through your own congressional representatives to get the tour of the White House. But let's talk Washington, D.C. for a bit. Next week, May 16th through the 17th, the U.S. High-Speed Rail Association is putting on a phenomenal conference at the Sidley Austin Conference Center right there in the heart of Washington, D.C., a few blocks away from the White House. People have a variety of reasons for wanting to go to this event. For me, I cannot afford not to go because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to try to bring the state of California and the federal government closer together and on the same page. Here in California, we've been going green very aggressively, but I kind of feel like there's too much oil money in the Koch brothers in transportation planning and US politics. They have a lineup of around 60 speakers, and some are going to go for hearing those 60 speakers. Others are going to go for the round trip Acceleride between Washington, D.C. and New York, scheduled for Friday after the conference, Friday, May 19th. Some, get this, are going to go there to see Mr. Andy Kuntz, the president and CEO of the U.S. High-Speed Rail Association, give me a big whipping, take me out behind the barn with the hose, because he's told me twice, David, we don't want you to come to the conference. No, wait for us to come to California. I said, Andy, I'm not missing this for the world. So we'll see you in DC, 16th to the 17th of May next week. It'll be fun. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Swagel.
Mr. Chair, we will now move to the Zoom participants. Once again, if you are joining the meeting via Zoom and wish to participate in public comment, please use the raise your hand feature located at the bottom of your screen. Or if you are dialing in by phone, press the number 2. This will raise your hand and put you into the queue. Speakers will be called upon in the order that their hands are raised. Once you are in the queue and your name is called, please click the prompt at the bottom of your screen to allow the microphone to be unmuted. If you are joining by phone, we will be calling upon you on your last 4 digits of your number. At that point, you will hear a message that your phone is being unmuted. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes to speak. I will remind you when you have 15 seconds remaining. When it's your turn to speak, please slowly and clearly say your first and last name, and if applicable, state the organization you're representing. Mr. Chairman, at this time, we don't show any speakers from Zoom or phones.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. We will now move on to the agenda items for today. The first is consideration of approving the March 16th, 23 board meeting minutes. Yes. Director Camacho and a second by Director Williams, all in favor. Oh, call the roll if you will.
Director Schenk? Chair Richards?
Here.
Director-
Yes. Too many
Director
people are
Camacho.
talking to me.
Vice Chair Miller?
Aye.
Director Perea? Director Gilmetti? Director Escutia? Director Williams?
Aye.
Director Cohen?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the measure passes.
Thank you. And now on to item number 2, the construction update. We'll start out with our CEO, Mr. Kelly. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. Brian Kelly, Chief Executive Officer, California High-Speed Rail Authority.
I have with me here today, Ben Ruiz, who is our contract manager for construction package 2-3 in the Central Valley. Of course, you guys know Daniel Horgan, who is our deputy COO on the project, and somewhere is Bill Casey. Bill Casey, our current COO on the project. And as we go through this, they may step up and walk through a couple issues or help answer some of your questions. But as the board may recall, every November and May, I walk through an update on where we are in construction. And May being upon us, it's time to do it again. So we'll walk through each of the challenges and opportunities on the construction packages 1 through 4. I think one thing I just want to say as an overview on this, because the challenges for each package are the same. The difference is the magnitude of the challenge, and the nearly singular challenge is moving the utilities, doing the third-party agreements and moving the utilities so we can get to full construction. We are well through this on CP4, which will be concluding later this summer, but there's more to do and higher levels of, thank you. More to do and higher levels of challenges on CP1, for example, that goes right through downtown Fresno, and on 2-3. But all of this is about moving utilities, and typically in a project, and as we've stated before, as we go forward into the next construction projects, we are working to make sure we sequence this correctly so that these kinds of things are out of the way before we start construction. That's going to be really important for us going forward.
Brian,
Anyway,
just a
yes.
quick question. Are the slides that we have in our
Yes.
board book the same as what's up here? And
Yes.
if there's going to be any update, if you would just point it
I
out,
will.
because it's sort of
There,
hard to.
yeah, I will.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So let's move to the next slide and I'll jump right into this. Just to orient the public and all of you, the initial operating segment that we're proposing to build is the 171 miles between Merced and Bakersfield. It is all 100% environmentally cleared. 119 miles currently under construction. We are in advanced design on 52 additional miles. We're in design now on the Central Valley stations, and we're looking forward to coming back to the board later in the year for advancement on the track and systems procurements, and ultimately a train procurement in 2024. Initial operations between 2030 and 2033, as we indicated in the project update report. Next slide.
Brian, I have a question for you, please.
Yes.
If you go back to that previous
Sure.
slide,
Can we go back to the prior slide? Thank you.
just using that map as our guide,
Yep.
the Bright Line project, where
Yes.
was it originally going to come? And where is it going to be now? Do you have a pointer or a light that we could,
Yeah, I don't have a pointer, but let's use that map and I'll kind of walk you through it.
okay,
Initially, Brightline was going from Victorville, which is about 50 miles east. If you look at the Palmdale dot on this map, there you go. Moving about 50 miles to the east is the town of Victorville. And initially they were going to do an operating segment between Victorville and then going directly east through mostly desert area into Las Vegas on the Nevada side of the border. I think the entirety of that stretch is on the order of 160, 170 miles. And about 140 of those miles are on the California side, but it's directly east from that Palmdale dot is what you're looking at. Victorville is slightly to the right of that. And then their initial segment was Vegas to Victorville. Now, Brightline has had some challenges on selling they started out as a wholly private entity. And so they had some challenges in selling their bonds to begin construction with that on that ridership level there. And I think also troubled by COVID and other things that upset the marketplace. But now Brightline is looking to go still to Victorville, but then turning a bit south to go to Rancho Cucamonga. And that extends their trip about to roughly 200 miles. Rancho Cucamonga is slightly east of downtown LA. And so their goal is to go there, and then ultimately they'd like to reach the LA Union Station. But their initial segment at this point is coming in from the east into Rancho Cucamonga, and there you see it, Rancho Cucamonga to Victorville, and then they turn right or east to Las Vegas.
Brian, if I may,
Yeah.
I think this discussion on Brightline is critical and one that we have to have
Mhm.
amongst us board members as well as the public.
Mhm.
But I don't want it to interrupt your report
Mhm.
on construction update.
Mhm.
But through the chair, maybe this is a discussion, Mr. Chairman, in terms of Brightline and its impact on high-speed rail that we need to have as a board. I think this is an opportunity for us, to look at Brightline as a potential partner. But at the same time, we need to figure out, as I was discussing with some board members yesterday, how was it that Brightline was able to get rights of way for free in California and that we in California approved that? That to me is absolutely stunning. And it is what it is, but there's an opportunity here to perhaps remedy that. But it's definitely an example of how can we make this a win-win situation for both Brightline as well as high-speed rail. But I don't want it to interrupt your construction update report, but it's definitely something that we need to discuss like now.
Could we agendize that? for the next
Mr.
meeting?
Chairman,
Yes, I'll work on putting that on the agenda.
Okay.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
uh,
Yes,
uh,
Director Shank?
Yeah, I agree. There was just something that our CEO just said that had a little red flag on it, that they didn't do well on their bonds. So are they going to be a competition with us for public dollars? So again, I agree with Martha. We don't want to divert you from your report, but that's something that we ought to be talking about.
I don't know if you want me to respond to any of that or just get back to the report, but I would just say that Brightline has redefined themselves. At one time, they were going to be a private-only entity running a private-only operation. They could not sell bonds to achieve that. That is not unusual in Texas that tried to go all private and high-speed rail. They have not advanced the ball very far. Brightline is now seeking public funds to start their operations. Some of that, in my view, I see some opportunity. In my view, electrified high-speed rail throughout California is a positive, and we can and should find ways to work with them. And so I'm hopeful that through that discussion, we can get there, because I also think there's great opportunity for economies of scale on things like equipment and other things that could help us both. But a conversation for another day. Just last point, they did get what I would call a deal that I'm envious of on right of way, but in part it's because they're building their system totally within, almost totally within the highway right of way of Caltrans. And part of their deal is that they're making certain improvements to some of that Caltrans right away, but they access that. And
So Caltrans gave them the rights of way for free?
no, there was an agreement. There was an agreement with the department that involved how they got it. They did not have to spend volumes of dollars, but they do make some commitments to improving some of that assets that Caltrans now owns, and that's part of their agreement.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Okay, yes,
Yes,
Director. Williams.
No, I appreciate that this has come up, and I wholeheartedly support that notion that we have that conversation. And I guess I would say a friendly amendment to that is that we not limit ourselves to just a discussion of Brightline. I think as a board, we should be thinking about what all of our options are, what all of our potential partners are to move this system forward. So I think if we could think about, maybe the initial conversation is with Brightline, because they are further along in terms of their presence here in California and their future potential presence here in California. But I don't think we should limit ourselves to just a discussion of Brightline. I think we should think about all of our expanded potential
Thank you.
partners.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you. Yes, Director Galmetti.
would this be appropriate to have a workshop to talk about it?
Yeah, yes, I think so. I think that what we'll do is Brian and I'll get together and we'll decide the best way to get the most information out as soon as possible and have that discussion.
Can have a better exchange.
Yes, I agree.
As
Okay.
well as having the benefit of a legal advice in this workshop, because as I was discussing with Lynn last night, and obviously I'm coming here at this as a lawyer. The question for me is, we have a private corporation that received rights of way for free from our own transportation agency. And does that amount to a gift of public funds? You don't have to answer that right now. It's a legal question, but it's something that needs to be briefed. I would love to get a legal brief on that one
Yeah.
in preparation for this type of a workshop.
Thank you. I think what we can do is to each of the members of the board, any items that you want to have discussed when we get this put together, please make sure you let me know. Just send me a text or an email, and we'll get back to you, and we'll work towards incorporating all the things that would be appropriate for a workshop type of environment. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and
Thank you.
members. Next slide, if we can get back to that. Okay. So generally on the Central Valley update, what are our objectives and goals as we go forward? We're achieving strong construction management in 2023. The first part of that, as we've discussed before, is completing entirely the full project definition. And as we've talked about before in this board and what we put in prior business plans and project update reports, is getting all of the past agreements defined, put them in the contracts, and put them into our budgets. And that's what we're doing. 12 out of 13 outstanding major commercial issues have been settled. And the one big one that's outstanding is now in arbitration. And that's where we are on that. Completing right-of-way. This has been one of our better success stories here, is when we started back in 2018, and we had about 1,400 parcels done. We needed 2,300. Today, we're up to 22 delivered to the contractor. That's about 97%. We'll be at 98% by the end of 2023. And then importantly, as you'll see in the presentation going forward, our efforts to finalize third-party approvals and agreements so we can move utilities. This is a big part of what we're working on now. We have formed both a task force on this and reshuffled some management to oversee the third-party agreements. And we have very focused work on this. We were tracking 67 different utility relocations that were escalated to me through work with our staff. 65 of those have been resolved, and we're working to conclude the final 2. Again, that number will move as we have new challenges, but again, on the initial set, we're making great progress. And then updating design and construction activities, working with the design build contractors to resequence work and mitigate schedule impacts where we can. And we're doing that now through negotiation with them as we get the final schedule set for CP1 and 2-3. Next slide. Right-of-way status, I'll move through these pretty quickly, but as you can see here, between 2018 and 2023, we delivered 841 parcels to the contractor. 410 additional parcels were added, and they were added because we were finalizing prior design changes. Those are now done. And then you can see on the right, we're now at 2,222 parcels delivered on that pie chart. That's 96.6%. And the parcels required has actually dropped a little bit. It's down to 2,293, which makes puts us at about 97% complete with right-of-way. Next slide. This is just a graphic that shows the process of right-of-way, the different colors around the ring are steps in the process to gain private property for a public works project. And without going into much detail on that, I'll just say that in September 22, we had 160 parcels remaining. Today, we're down to 71 remaining. So again, we're moving the right-of-way pretty efficiently. Next slide. I want to start with construction package 4 because this is the one that is the furthest along. The definition of this project is the southernmost 22-mile stretch on the 119 construction segment in the valley. It includes at-grade, retained fill, and aerial sections of the high-speed rail alignment. Substantial completion is expected this summer in 2023, and I'm going to talk about the most recent risk involved with that schedule in just a moment. Next slide. This is something that we report each month to the F&A committee. The bottom yellow dotted line would show sort of an underperformance. The red line would be a preeminent performance in terms of schedule and cost and how we're moving this through. The blue line is where we are. We're scheduling a July, right on this July, end of July completion date. And we're in a July-August schedule right now on that. And again, I'll talk about what's affecting the schedule on CP4 next. Next slide. Oh, this is the scorecard that we typically use to go through the status of each project. Again, all the design on CP4 is completed. 96% of the right-of-way parcels have been delivered. Utility relocation is 84% done. And then all the structures and all the guideway are either completed or in progress right now. Overall contract is through about 90%. Next slide. So the biggest single issue on CP4, and this is a theme you'll hear on each of them, but it is moving the utilities that we have to get out of the way to complete the work and the guideway. Our goal is to get the guideway completely open and clear so we can talk about getting the track installed as soon as we can. So the last remaining issue here really is there's a series of conflicts that we have with an irrigation district down there called Semi-Tropic Irrigation District. And it's been over the course of several years, we've gone through difficult negotiations to get agreement on how we would review the work and execute the work. The good news is we're at the end of that review process. They've approved virtually all of the designs for the utility relocation here, and we're coming to the last ones on this. The risk to the schedule at this point is tied to the rainfall that we've had in 2023. And these irrigation districts are now moving a lot of water. And again, you'll hear more about this at the end of the presentation. But on CP4, that means that Semi-Tropic has a little less ability to shut down certain flows where we would need to move that work. And so our team is working with them now on a schedule and a coordination of how we can do that to stay on schedule and get this work moved. But because of the volume of water, there's a lot of things that they're doing on the water policy side that requires them to keep water moving. And so we're working with them on each location we can shut down, move the pipes, and have them still achieve what they're trying to achieve in moving water. And again, it's a big water year. So we're working through that, and that's really the last issue. I would just say this. CP4 is 22 miles long. 21 miles of this are either complete, all the structures, the guideway is complete, or in progress and close to completion now. The issue that's holding up is that last mile, which is it's not one continuous mile, but each conflict we have with Semi-Tropic equals about 1 mile and in total. And so it's getting these things done so we can move this utility line to complete CP4. That's where we are. Happy to answer any questions about that or move on. Okay. Director Perea had asked us to include in both the F&A committee reports and in the presentation here, sort of a scorecard on the utility relocations that are involved on each of the CPs. So if we go to the next slide, this is the high-level summary of what's needed to advance CP4. You see there's 143 total utilities that need to be moved down there. They're mostly split between electric, gas, telecom, and water. And thus far on CP4, we have 120 of the 143 have been relocated or are in progress now, and we have 23 that are yet to start. Most of those are related to the Semi-Tropic utility issue. Next slide. Again, just breaking this out further by each category, you can see that total electric utilities in this area is 62. Most of those are completed, only 2 have not started yet. Gas, all of those have been moved. Telecom, 33 are needed. They're all moved or in progress. And the last is the irrigation, and that's the not started. You see 21. That's really tied to the Semi-Tropic issue that we outlined. But again, the teams are working constructively with Semi-Tropic on that schedule and coordination to move those. Next slide.
So Semi-Tropic is the only issue on CP4?
It really is the last remaining issue that we have to get solved. I mean, there's a lot of things that we've done in recent months. For example, we've just concluded a series of agreements with the city of Wasco to complete the work in downtown Wasco, and that's hats off to Garth Fernandez, who just got that work done. We powered through some tough negotiations with North Kern Water District, but that's mostly behind us. It's really now about the timing of being able to move the Semi-Tropic equipment, and that's really what's left. Okay.
Brian, just quickly, but that's not affecting your schedule, this slide that you went through before, you don't think?
Well, the issue, we are on schedule to complete in summer of 2023. The question that's a little outstanding is we have to work with Semi-Tropic on the volume of water that they are now moving and how and when we can coordinate the closure of certain elements so we can move the pipes. And generally it's a 48-hour close period we need to move the pipes, and we're going through that process with them now. The volume of water has upped their business, and so they're moving water more continuously now, and so we have to work with them on that schedule. But that's where it stands right now.
So we don't know, or you're.
No, I mean, we
do you have
don't
an
know,
idea?
but again, today, as I'm standing here right now, we're on a summer 2023 schedule, and we're just working through with them how we can move each one of those. And again, as the water volume changes and anything changes, we'll come back and say, this is where we are. But it's the last issue remaining on CP4. Construction package 1. This is the 32-mile stretch that is the northern part of the 119 miles. It goes right through urban Fresno, unlike some of the other construction areas that are mostly rural. This goes right through the downtown Fresno area. There's 19 grade separations, 3 viaducts, and 2 trenches. Our estimated substantial completion date is 2026, as we indicated in the project update report. Next slide. Scorecard here is, again, we've made a lot of progress in the last couple of years on this. We've approved all of the design here. The right-of-way handed to the contractor is up to 98% on CP1. Utility relocation, there are a ton of utilities to move through the downtown Fresno area. 78% are done or in progress, but just to give you an order of magnitude, we need 992 utilities to be moved just in downtown Fresno, just through this stretch here. So there's a lot to move, but again, we're making good progress, and I'll get to that in just a minute. Structures complete or in progress, about 80%. Miles of guideway complete or in progress, 63. And the contract is 65% through. Next slide. Again, this is just a snapshot of where we are on the structures. There are 33 total structures that need to be completed. 17 of those are done. 9 are underway, and 7 are remaining to be started. Next slide. The guideway again for the 32 miles of guideway, 2 miles is totally complete. 18 miles are underway, and the last 12 miles are remaining. Next slide. Again, like with CP4, it's all about moving the utilities. Here, there are more utilities and different kinds. That first issue is our ability to work with the city of Fresno to approve road closures so we can advance work. But I'm happy to report again, mostly due to the work of Garth Fernandez, our regional director, working with the mayor's office in the city of Fresno. They just agreed to a 2.5-year road closure on Church Avenue, which is very helpful to keep us on schedule. And so that we are now moving utilities on Church Avenue because of that. The other risk is construction progress due to spring snow melt impacts on the Fresno Irrigation District. And again, this is the same issue with semi-tropic. They're all moving a lot more water these days. And so we have to work with them very closely on coordinating when we can shut down various pipes to move and continue our work. And so that's what we're doing. We have had a lot of conversation with the railroads, UP, and mostly UP in this area, about getting approvals for where we're touching their assets or crossing their applications. And again, our third-party team is working better today with UP than I've seen in some time. And the good news is they've recently approved a couple of things, including the design of the intrusion protection barrier, and that work is now moving quickly. And then we have significant utilities that require those third-party approvals that I talked about before. So we have a lot of risk mitigations underway to deal with those risks, including partnering with the city of Fresno on Church Avenue, a close coordination with the Fresno Irrigation District to understand the flows and develop a mitigation plan to move those facilities. And we're conducted and have conducted partnering meetings with the executive engagement of UPRR to advance and enhance that relationship. And that's going well. And also we're engaging all the third-party executives and management teams where we need them, from AT&T, PG&E, and others, to get approvals of things we need to get approved to move the utilities. So all of that is work that we have underway. Next slide. Again, the summary here on utilities is large. This mostly is through urban Fresno. You need a total of relocations of 992 utilities. We have relocated or have in progress about 774 of those. So we have left about 218 to get started, but that's where we are. And just to give you a magnitude of how we have moved this ball, between 2015 and 2020, the authority, in those 6 years, the authority relocated a total of 523 utilities. And in the last 3 years, 21, 22, and what we're doing in 23, we're moving about 700. So our pace has gone up significantly, and we are, we have to keep that pace, and in fact, increase that pace to make sure we complete the schedule. But the work and the magnitude of utility relocations is up significantly. Next slide. Again, further scorecard that Director Perea asked about, and again, here it is. We'll also be reporting this each month to F&A committee by utility, but you can see here between electric, gas, telecom, and the irrigation districts, you see what's left. And again, of the 992, we have about 218 that need to start. The others are either done or in progress. Next slide. Construction package 2-3. This is.
Mr. Chairman, I have some questions on that. Do we want to wait till the end of the report, then ask questions?
I can take them now if they're about
No, let's just
CP1.
do it at the time you've got them for all the members. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah,
Director
going back
Perea.
to that chart.
Yes.
First, thank you for putting that in the packet. And,
Yep.
you know, I understand I asked for this information, but it's a board issue. It's not just one board member's issue. We should all be focused on what's happening here. And I met with Garth this week to reconcile this
Yeah.
format versus the format he gave me in February. It was different. So
Mhm.
we probably spent most of our time just trying to figure out what numbers the boxes were in. But he did talk about some success you've had in the last few months in clearing out more of the things that have been outstanding. But my question is focused, or concern is focused more around, I think, going back what Member Shank said in January about, you know, our absolute highest priority should be finishing that 119 miles. And if we're doing everything that we can to accomplish that one and have the money to pay for that 119, we have to get that done. Now, in my mind, asking for this report after about 1.5 years, I know staff did a lot of work in preparing the new critical path to get things done. And when you presented a few months back saying CP1 would be completed December of 25, so that was 36 months from the beginning of this year. We're 6 months now into that. So what makes these numbers, or what will make these numbers more meaningful to me when I look at 218 or 13 that have yet to even be started versus what's in progress, is how does our critical path for each of those 218 line up to that 36 months? And Garth did mention to me that there is a critical path for each of these that by the end of this year, you pretty much know what is going to be completed this year and then on, which makes sense to me. But as a board member, I think, at least I've experienced in my short time here, but also watching it over the last 8, 9, 10 years, there's always seems to be slippage. And slippage costs time and money. And I mean, we don't even tell people anymore when they'll be riding a train. We can't tell them that. But I think the reason is because we as a board, I think, need to be engaged a lot sooner in terms of if there is going to be slippage, that we pivot sooner, as opposed to being told, you know, it's going to be December of 27. So, you know, what I'd like, Brian, and first I want to compliment staff. I think they've done a great job in moving things. I know this is the challenge, but if we can't figure out CP1, you know, it's just going to be a challenge all the way down the line. So what I'd like is whatever the critical path is for those things that are in progress or those that have not yet been started, if this board could have that, the copies of that, because by the end of this year, if we're not achieving whatever the goal is that you have to complete these pieces, we need to pivot, if not sooner. But we can't know that if we don't have the information. So I'm just trying to get my hands around how we can, with 99% certainty know that in December 2025, we're going to have substantial completion of
Well,
CP1.
I want to be clear about the dates because the thing that, you know, I want to give the board everything you need as soon as I can get it to you. But the other thing that I am not doing is I am not putting out dates that I can't deliver on. And so I'm working we are in the challenge of moving utilities after construction started.
Understood.
Right.
Understood.
And so, yeah, there's a lot of mess and movement involved in that. Now,
Understood.
and none of us control that. That's the world we're in. What we control is the future. And so the ones that we do next will get in the right order. Utilities will be moved before construction starts. But in this case, the thing I wanted to say here is we are, you know, on CP1, we have a good handle on what's in front of us. We have moved 130 utilities last year. There's a goal to move no less than 100 in this section this year. There's 218 left. And our completion, our substantial completion date that the contractor submitted was initially December 25, but we're in negotiations. And because there are issues of flooding and water, as I said in the project update report, we have a 2026 date. And the reason we're saying the 2026 date is because we want to deliver against the risk. And so as we're seeing things like flooding and water moving through the irrigation districts, and we have to deal with that, and we have to adjust for that, and we have to finish the negotiations on the time impact analysis, you know, I think it's going to move into 26, but I've said that in the project update report. I said that to this board in February of this year, and that's where we are on CP1. And so as we complete our negotiation on the time impact analysis, as we get a handle on the coordination of the new water issues to move these wet utilities, you know, we will update the schedule. But that 2020, the reason I am, if you look back a couple of slides, when will we reach substantial completion on this? I'm saying 2026. And the reason I'm saying 2026 is I believe that's when we're going to get it done. To get a specific month and quarter on that, we need to drive home a couple of these issues. And that's what we're working on now. So by the time we complete the negotiation on the time impact analysis, get the full accounting of the water issues, we will lay out a specific date. I'm telling you today it's 2026, and I believe it will be in 2026. And then we will strive to meet that. But that's where we are. And the difficulty is just us, you know, getting through some of that uncertainty that's there now. But I'm confident that 2026 is the date we will meet. And I think our team is confident on that. But we didn't plan for the biggest flood since 1968 to hit the valley, but it's hit. And so it's causing us some movement on CP4. We're still going to complete CP4 in 2023, and we're going to complete CP1 in 2026. But we have to adjust these things. And I'm trying to give you guys and the public the most specific dates I can with all that I know so that we can meet those dates. And the difference to me as in my role is the definition of what we have to do, the definition of what's in front of us has never been as clear as it is now. And that's because we had a lot of things that were uncertain when I got here, but we've defined those things. We now know what it looks like, and we can drive to dates that I believe we can meet. And that's what I'm offering the board.
Okay, thank you, Brian. But if I remember correctly, when we did finally get our update a few months back, we were told December 25.
I said that's what the contractor submitted to us. And then we were going into the time impact analysis negotiation. And I said at that time.
It's 26.
And I
When in 26?
And I said that in the project update report. And we said that
26.
we don't have the date yet because we have not finished the time impact analysis negotiation. So we will conclude that and come back with the specific quarter or month. But we have to finish our work. And the work involves, now that we've got these settlements on commercial disputes settled, the project defined, now we go through the time impact analysis and we finalize the date. And that's the work we have underway right now.
So if I understood staff correctly, though, we do have a critical path.
Yes.
For what's in progress.
Yes.
And for what has not been started.
Yes.
Can this board get a copy of
Yes.
those critical path?
Yes.
Okay.
So that, just to be clear with the board, the critical path on the utilities are mostly tied to the critical path on the structures that got to get done by that date. So the long pole in the tent, the structures that are the last to be done to pull into that date, Church Avenue, for example, got a lot of utility needs, and those will be the critical path utilities that got to get done so that we can meet the Church Avenue date. And so but I'm happy to give to you all a analysis of those structures and those utilities that got to get done and by what date.
Yeah, because in my mind, again, I don't have the construction background that some folks in here may have, but it just seems to me that if your path is saying based on all these criteria you just mentioned, that we're going to have another 25% of these things done by December of end of this year. And
Yeah, so we should have.
Let's just say we get to the end of the year and it's only 10%.
The
In my
one
mind,
thing
we're
to
in
keep
trouble.
in mind, Director Perea, is that it's not linear in the sense of completion. I mean, you can have a year where because of the size of the work that you're undertaking in terms of the complexity and the time it will take, you may end up with 10 this year and 30 next. But what you're asking for, your comments are very reasonable and noted, and the information should be applied. But what you should see is a schedule as to when they are scheduled to be done. But you can't just say if there's 100 and it's 4 years, you're going to get 25 a year. It won't work.
No,
that
I
way.
understand that. I
Okay.
get that. I'm
Okay.
just saying that if you're saying by December, we're going to be, this is where we need to be to get to the finish line,
Yes.
fine. But
Yeah.
if we're not there,
Right.
and if it's substantial in terms of it's
Yeah.
impacting now the 26
Yes.
date, whatever that might be,
Yes.
this board needs to pivot.
It-
Too many times we
Yeah.
sit here and we're just told it's too late, can't do anything, but now it's going to be 2 more years. No.
Yeah.
This board has to take responsibility for what we're charged for.
I agree with that.
And if we say we're going to get something
Yeah.
done by a certain time, then it's going to get done. And you as our staff, I mean, I think we give you the full authority and support and approve things that you bring to us so you can get it done. But we got to hold staff accountable.
Look,
Right.
listen,
Thank you.
in my view, no question about that in terms of holding staff accountable. The only thing I just say is, again, we have not had project definition
Yeah.
until we got to this project update report.
Let me jump in.
And
Yeah.
so now that we've got that and we can lay out and the schedules that are in the project update report, I believe we're going to meet. And you should hold us accountable to that. Absolutely.
And it's most reasonable that we should get the detailed information. So I think what I said before, your points are all well taken and noted in the information. And Director Gilmetti, thank you very much. Henry.
I build things. I think that this board's frustration is built around the fact that this thing is a design build project. And I equate it would be like me building a house on plans that I don't have, on land that I don't own, and I don't know what it's going to cost. And so we've thrown out numbers that are just anticipated numbers. And I think that's, Henry, why you get frustrated. But until we have all the completed plans and we have all the right of way and we have all the utilities done, we're still going to be frustrated. This started in the wrong direction, and we're here. We inherited this. We've got, and Brian and his staff inherited it. We're trying our best to get back on track, but literally this was the wrong way to get this thing started. And now we're trying to fix it. I'm hoping that the extensions are not going to be a design build. At least I couldn't vote for it. And those extensions are going to have to be a design bid build.
Thank you,
Mr.
Director
Chairman?
Gilmetti. Director Escutia.
Yes, I think, not that I'm trying to explain what Director Perea was saying, but I think that what Henry has been saying is very accurate, especially with regard to the need for the board to pivot. Because if we don't meet those timelines, then what do we do? And we need to have already that plan in place in terms of options if timelines are not met, or even federal funding. If we don't get the federal funds that we allegedly expect to get sometime in October, what happens if we don't get that money? I think what you're seeing here, Brian, is that the board would like to get obviously more information, but at least from my perspective, I would love to see what's plan B and what's plan C. If we don't meet this timeline, what happens next? If we don't get this money, what happens next? Because last time I checked, it's going to take almost tens of billions of dollars to drill through the Tehachapi's and the Pacheco Pass. last time I checked, I have not found a money tree that's going to give me that money that I need to drill through those mountain ranges. So then what happens next? What do we do? And I think that's what you're seeing, Brian, that maybe, it's time for this board to really, really analyze this very objectively. I realize that the project did not get started the right way. I understand that. But you know what? It is what it is, and that's the hand that we have been dealt with. So now I am just trying to figure out, okay, what do we do next if this doesn't happen? What do we do next if that doesn't happen? That's the way I think. I hate to be such a, negative person, but the way government works, I'm not too sure that money is there. And if money's not there, how can we even release contracts? RFQs or RFPs if the money is not there. As a lawyer, I would say that's a misrepresentation. But you're shaking your head, Brian. Why?
Well, I mean, because we're not operating that way.
Okay.
I mean,
No,
and look, if I've failed in the project update report to describe our priorities, or to in the numerous reports to this board, not describe the steps that are in front of us that we're doing, that's on me. Okay, that's on me. But the project update report is extremely clear on our priorities. If we don't
No.
get federal funding, we finish the 119 miles, we finish the environmental work, and we're done, because there's nothing else to do. But what we've said to the federal government, and we just had the FRA out with us for a whole week last week, and we reiterated the point to them, and we said it in the project update report. The 119 miles does not represent a very good railroad operating run. What this governor and this board set us on a path to do was get an operating run that's better than the 119. That's 171. Now, it is true that we need federal money to get that completed. This year, we're asking for a lot of federal money, $3 billion in this grant and an $8 billion partnership over the next 5 years. And that's what we've requested. As I testified to the legislature 2 weeks ago, if the federal government doesn't step up this year, we should do the 119, finish the environmental work, and go home, because there's nothing else to do, unless the legislature and the state want to fund it itself. And that's a separate question. But I'm telling this board, we put it to the project update report. I've testified to the legislature. We don't get the federal money. There's nothing else to do beyond the 119. The sad part is, and I'm happy to show you a picture of it, the 119 miles ends in an orchard.
Right.
Okay, that is not where a rail should go. And that's why this board made the right call. This governor made the right call to get into the cities, Bakersfield, Fresno, Merced, as the starting unit. Now, the concerns about what it's going to take or the cost to get to LA and San Francisco, you're right, we don't have that funding. And we've been very clear about that. But what are we trying to do? Get an operating run going in the Central Valley where we started construction on 171 miles. If we have federal help, and we will know this year, if we have federal help, we should do that. Then everywhere else, it's advanced the environmental work through 30% design. So the whole state, every policymaker and all the board members will know what it will cost to get to San Francisco and LA. And that's what we're doing. So we are trying to get the minimal work done that we owe the federal government, 119 miles and the environmental documents. And we're trying to get an operating run that makes sense. That map shows it all. On the right is the termination points of 119 miles. On the left is a termination point of getting into the cities. And even the federal government, who gave us money for the first 119 miles, they agree with us that you really got to get into the cities. And so when they say they agree with us, that's one thing, but they got to show us. And when they show us this year, if we get funding, we'll be off and running on the Merced to Bakersfield extensions. And I'll just say one other thing to the board members, because I believe this, and it was stated in a legislative hearing. Lou Thompson, the chair of the peer review group, who I've worked with my entire time here, sat next to me at the committee in the legislature and said, you know, you really shouldn't just build the Merced to Bakersfield thing unless you're serious about doing all of phase one. Phase one is San Francisco to LA. I agree with him. I agree with it. We have never said Merced to Bakersfield is the end. We've said Merced to Bakersfield is the beginning. And then we advance everything, and we got to go back and get state funding and federal funding, and we got to make it work segment by segment. But for me, that's not so unusual. You know, when the BART system was created in the Bay Area, It covered 3 counties, Contra Costa, Alameda, and San Francisco. And they built a limited system. And then they've been adding on for years. And it became one of the most efficient transit systems in America with a 70+% revenue, fare box revenue. And they now cover virtually every county in the Bay Area, except for the North Bay. But that doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. And what I've tried to indicate to the board and push the board to do, and the policy I believe in, is get trains operating as soon as we can. Because I think the project has been too ethereal or too abstract for the public until they see, feel, touch, and can ride trains. And so for us, let's get something going in the valley where we started construction, and then let's work on how we get out of there and into the Bay Area and LA. We put that in the project update report. We put that in the business plan. I testified to that in the legislature. When this board adopts the business plan, to me, that's the policy we want to do. And that's what your management team is working on. And again, I'm for all the information you guys need, and I'm absolutely for management being held accountable to deliverables. And I'm just telling you guys that the project update report for me was the first time I could lay out a series of things because we had enough definition where I feel like I can be held accountable to those goals. And I think the board should hold us accountable to those goals.
I thank you for the clarification, because I got to be honest with you. This presentation right now, what you just said right now in the last 5 minutes, has been the most clear assessment of our policies for high-speed rail. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I also appreciate the practical notion that if we don't have enough money to do the add-ons, then we got to finish the 119 miles and be done with it. We just got to finish the 119 miles and be done with it. I
Okay.
can live with that. I can live with that, but we got to show something to the taxpayer,
No doubt.
you know? And I think that that will help us in a way rehabilitate our image so that people are not going to say like, oh my God, you know, high-speed rail, we don't want to deal with them, but rather, you know, people would want to deal with us. And if Brightline is a potential, you know, colleague of ours, let's do it. And I know we'll have that discussion later on, you know, but I appreciate the clarity, because this is the first time I have heard it very clear that it's 119 miles for right now. And in essence, we're done with it, because me, Martha, the doubting Thomas, I just don't see the money coming from the feds on this issue in order for us to do the quote unquote add-ons. And I'll be honest with you, Brian, you know, I would love, you know, even just dealing with LA County and the transportation issues of LA County as an add-on. You know, I understand that there's probably not going to be enough money in this world to drill through the mountains in order for us to connect. That's okay. As a Los Angelino, I can live with doing something for LA County in terms of, you know, upgrading our transportation arteries within the county, especially in preparation for the LA 2028 Olympics. I can live with that, you know, but I'm glad to hear that, and thank you, Henry, for forcing this discussion. Thank you. Because I'm glad to see that basically, you know, Brian has basically said, you know, that if we don't have the money in, we do the 119 miles and be done with it. That's what you said.
Unless the state funds it another way. But
You
that's-
know,
but that's what we have to
you
do.
know very well, and I'm a state appointee, I'm a legislative appointee, that we cannot expect any money from the state legislature. We can probably get some money from the cap and trade, but that's not going to be enough. And we know that those cap and trade funds will disappear by the year 2030. You know, hopefully by the year 2030, you know, there might be another source. Maybe we can convince the federal government to take an outsized role in financing this. But right now, I don't see it. But I'm glad that at least in our minds, in your mind, as the head of the management team, Brian, that you are already seeing the many ways that this can unfold, and obviously the actions that we need to take as a board, you know, and whether that means we need to pivot or not, I guess we shall cross that bridge when we have to. Thank you.
Director Scusia. Please go forward, Mr. Kelly.
Sure. I will just say,
Did you have, hold on, we're going to, one more, and then we want to get moving. Go ahead, Director Camacho, I'm sorry.
I was just wanted to make a comment that perhaps the reluctance from, and we need to look at this on all sides, reluctance for the feds to reinvest more money to us, which they didn't give us last time. That they look at the daunting number of $100 billion that we're going to need to complete this. When we look at, and if we look at most of those costs are related to tunneling, the Pacheco Pass and the Tehachapi's. And then whatever we're going to do from Burbank to Palmdale. But I think that one of the things that we've always looked at is that number is scary. No matter if they gave us the $8 billion that we asked for, that is not going to buy us anything. That's going to allow us to finish 171 miles, maybe. So maybe that number is so daunting to them as well, but we haven't presented another plan. We haven't looked at perhaps, why are we only looking at tunneling? Maybe there are other ways. Maybe if we got to Bakersfield, we took 58 to the 14. Maybe it's a long way around, but have we talked about those plans? There are other ways of getting from Bakersfield to LA or from Bakersfield to San Francisco without spending $100 billion. So I just think that when the feds look at us, they're saying, okay, if I give them $8 billion, is it going to be a stranded asset? Because that's not enough to finish the project. And where are they going to get the $100 billion to finish that? So to me, it's just that we've not thought about those things. And that's one of the things that I'm hoping that we can begin to talk about is some alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Camacho.
I just want to add one thing, just because we've had 3 speakers on this issue, and I just want to say a couple things about a more optimistic view about this project, which I don't know when you talk about the feds or taking this long view, that's not my understanding at all. For the first time in years, we have both the speaker and the pro tem supporting our ask to the federal government. We did not have that in the past. We also have the head of both those transportation committees asking for this money, which we did not have in the past. We also had an administration under Trump that was very, very antagonistic towards this project. And I'm surprised at all of you because given your experience in politics, you know how things can change on a dime in terms of projects, revenue, tax issues. And we've done a remarkable job, I think, of bringing this project to a place where we had to pivot from planning design on a design build that was not successful to a project that is actually under construction, not fully permitted, but fully permitted in terms of our environmental and our federal involvement. And we're actually building. So now we're talking about our construction project here now, which is far from where we were when you and I came on the board, Ernie, and definitely with you, Lynn, when you started with this board. So I am very hopeful that we have actually a federal government that spent a week out here. We have the head of our transportation committee, both Assembly and Senate, I think, heading back to Washington next week. So honestly, we have a lot of things that are in the hopper that are very positive right now. There was a move, I think, last week to take away our cap and trade money, which was shut down immediately by all the Democratic leadership, even those that aren't necessarily completely on board. And we do have a good plan. We know what we're going to do if we don't get the $100 billion. But honestly, that is years away. And a whole different board will be probably dealing with that. And it's actually an exciting project that is still looked at by the world in terms of how have we done this. It certainly isn't easy. And I do admire and respect my colleagues here to ask these tough questions. Because when I go to talk about high-speed rail, I'm like the least liked person in the room, right? I mean, it's so frustrating, number one. We don't have the money, number two. We've had a lot of political criticism, number three. But despite all of that, we are building this thing. And we just opened another structure. And how many miles is that? 2, so just last month. So I don't share the pessimism, I think, of the 3 of you, because I do think we're at the cusp of moving the project forward. And I've been involved in a lot of construction projects, light rail here in Sacramento, light rail in San Diego. It's never fully funded at the beginning, ever. What you have to start with is you start in government. That's kind of how we do things. Is it the most efficient? No, it's terribly inefficient. But it is the way we have to do things because we have so many constraints and things get put together bit by bit. And I do think that's where we are with this project. I am very optimistic about the federal government and the federal funds coming. I do appreciate that we're going to have this discussion about Brightline because I think that's a good idea. But I do think we need to just stay the course a little bit here and realize that we have made a lot of progress. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
just
I apologize. I'm gonna have to respond I want to respond to that. Member Miller, you may have misunderstood the nature or tone of my questions. But I don't think there's a thing that Brian said that I didn't agree with. He was right. Okay. And I know in the last 5 years since he's been here, he's accomplished a lot in terms of getting us to a position of getting things done. But as a board, and as we sit here, we're not done. And the question, the one question that I asked, and let's just assume we get all the money that we asked from the feds this year. They give it to us all. Okay. We still can't come back to CP1 is where it started. And Member Gilmetti is right about the design build process. And it's tough to build a house when you don't have the plans. I get all that. We all get all that. My question is just real simple. We have now a list of what structures are in progress and which ones have not been started yet. The question is just simple. When are they going to get done? Let me finish. And what I'm asking for, and I think what this board needs, is that timeline of when they are going to get done, understanding that it doesn't mean it's not a real simple thing. Oh, this one's done, this one. There's pieces that get done based on what's being built. I get that. But if we get that money from the feds, and if this same board is sitting here a year from now, and we're having a discussion of structures, they're not done. We can't finish building because we're still dealing with right of way. We're still dealing with third-party issues. Then we're not serving the public. We're not doing our jobs. All I'm saying is we need that information so that if we are not reaching whatever milestones we have to reach whatever date it is in 26 that we're supposed to be substantially completed, that we can pivot in time to get it done. That's what I am asking for. And if you think that's pessimistic, then I'm going to have to disagree with you on that.
Well, no,
I want to get the job done.
I think we need to move on. I didn't mean to say that your comments about asking that question of Brian was pessimistic, because I think that is entirely appropriate. We need to know the schedule and we need to know when there is slippage. It was just a larger question of what do we do if you know, we have.
I think we all want to get it done.
We all want to get it done, and that is our charge.
Okay.
So I agree with you.
There's a
So,
difference
Mr.
between-
Chairman, I'm gonna,
Thank-
yeah. Thank
Okay,
you.
what I'd like to do is, I think everybody, I want to finish with Director Shank so we could move on, but all of your comments are all directed, I think frankly, all in the right direction. You're saying in many ways, some of the same things. I think Henry was talking less about money and talking about completion of things that we're already have the funds for and are under construction. But you were really talking about from a more macro level. And so I think we get it. I think it's a good conversation. It's explaining the reason why a board, I wish it could be a retreat, but a board work session is going to be very helpful for all 9 people here. Director Shank.
Well, I just very quickly, you said what I wanted to say. I thought this was one of the best discussions that we have had in a very long time. I think the tone has been just right. Everything that everyone has said, from Ernie saying, you know, are there other alternatives that we need to look at, to the idea that let's wait and see if we even get this first tranche of money, because if we do, that puts us in a different mindset with the public, I believe. So I just think this was excellent, and I endorse what Member Gilmetti has said, that we should have a workshop on this where this is all that we talk about, and we have the time to go back and forth as we just did today. And this is the importance of being in the same room to do it.
Thank you, Director Shank. Can we move? Do you need to update your report now, or can we, are the numbers
Hang on.
still
And
accurate?
in conclusion.
Let me get a Henry chapter, a Martha chapter, an Ernie chapter. I mean, I do want to say one thing, Mr. Chairman. I do want to move on, but I didn't hear anything from anybody I disagree with. Does the management team need to be accountable to the dates we give you? Yes. Do you need information to hold us accountable? Yes. Martha, you and I are on the same page if we don't get federal money. Okay. Ernie, my only thing about new alternatives is remember, and the board should remember, much of what we are doing is already dictated in statute by the voters who approved a bond bill that included the alignment. It's hard to get off of this one, but you guys have done a remarkable job in improving the environmental documents so we can move. So I just, again, there's a lot coming in. I appreciate all the comments. And again, Art, from a management perspective, it's definition so we can get to accountability, so we can get to completion. And that's what we're trying to do. Okay. If we could just quickly, I want to jump, if it's all right with the board members, unless you want me to cover anything else, I would jump to slide 32. I do want to just cover this issue because I think it's important for the board members to know and talk about introducing some additional risk. Sorry, if you go back to 31. As the board members are all aware, this was a very wet 2023. The water and snow pack affecting the Central Valley, and particularly some of the area where we work, according to the Department of Water Resources, is the most severe wet season since 1968. So we've seen a lot of water in the area. That significant weather really built up in March of 2023. 30 miles of our alignment were impacted in some way. We had 11 different construction sites that we had to shut down for a period of time. Not that our assets are damaged or impacted, but that the water was at such a level we couldn't work in that area. And so we had to shut down. About 11 sites. Most significant rainfall and snowfall I mentioned since 1968. Our structures are above this water line. I want people to understand that part. And in fact, in a very short period of time, we pivoted from a construction entity into an emergency response entity. And I'm proud that the authority during this time, if we can go to the next slide just to give you a graphic image. You know, you could see the flooding there. That's our construction site on the grassy area there. We're building a viaduct. But this is what the flooding came to here. And again, we had to shut down construction activities, but we did do things like use our assets to evacuate livestock in the area. Our contractor, DFJV, Dragados Flatiron, helped build a road, repave a roadway so folks can get in and out of Corcoran. And we used a bunch of dirt that we had for one of our structures to raise the elevation of another roadway so that there was ingress and egress from city of Alpaugh down in that area. So we pivoted quickly from a construction entity to an emergency response entity. And I'm very proud of the team for that. Next slide, just to show again some of the impact here. This is Deer Creek, an area where we're building the viaduct. You can see the viaduct right in the center there. If you look toward the left of that screen, you can see that flooding impacted State Route 43, which is partially flooded in that segment. That railroad track that is in between the construction area and the highway is the BNSF railroad, who they were never flooded out there, but it was close. Our structures are a bit higher than theirs in this area. We have a viaduct there. So again, we're well above the water line. Next slide. You can see that the water started to abate about a month after it came. You see here that the highway is now clear. The water has come down from the BNSF system. And of the 11 construction sites, we're now starting to get back to work at several that were shut down. I have these stats on the next slide, I think. Again, 11 sites were halted or delayed due to the flooding. One site is resumed construction. 6 sites will be back in construction in June. And then 4 more sites will come back to full construction in September. There are 7 irrigation facility relocations that were impacted. We coordinated with local water agencies on available work windows and mitigations to resume the construction and reduce delays. And again, this is now the issue of we are working closely with DWR to monitor the snowpack issue. and the volume of release or melt from that and how it will impact this area. And with that, getting a sense of that, we are working with the cities and the local irrigation districts on scheduling when we can move some of those facilities to complete our guideways. So this is a new issue that we're working with. But again, as of right now, we were not impacting any long-term schedule issues, but we have to coordinate with folks to make sure we can advance our work. And we're doing that. So there was some impact to us here. Next slide. Again, on CP1, no significant impact to the construction sites. On CP4, as I mentioned earlier, the biggest impact is now working with Semi-Tropic on moving their equipment. Next slide. Again, CP23 is where we saw most of this. And again, this is just a list of some of the assistance that we provided to Tulare and Kings County during the flooding. We worked closely with the Office of Emergency Services to do this, but there were several things we did here. And I do want to compliment our local team, Ben Ruiz and his team, as well as the contractor, Dragados Flatiron, and their team did a lot of important work to reopen roads, move dirt, and use their equipment to help with flood response, and that should be recognized. I think that's probably it. Next slide. That's all I got. Mr. Chairman, sorry it took so long.
Sit down before there's any other questions, please.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to belabor this issue, but I do want to commend the staff and the board for starting what I think is the kind of discussion and conversation that we should be having. And I agree with you, Director Escutia, that it is both the responsibility of the staff and management to inform us, but it's our responsibility to ask the questions and to read the responses. And so it's on all of us to make sure we deliver this for the public. So appreciate that.
Thank you, Director Williams. Brian, are you sure you want to take this on? Come over here for a second. I just want to give you one of these magic coins.
Good morning.
Brian, just CEO Kelly really wants to talk some more. So he wants to read into this for you.
No, I just want, I got some questions from members during the briefings about why we are presenting the benefit cost analysis that Brian's about to present. And I just want to say that as we're applying for federal funds, the FRA has laid out a methodology to determine the cost benefit of your project. And so this is in response to the FRA ask here. And Brian and our KPMG team has done this work, and this was part of our submittal that went to the federal government with our grant application. So they have a methodology and a score that we have to achieve, and under the methodology we submitted, we exceed that score. So Brian will get into the details, but I just want to inform the members why this is relevant to what we're doing. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Brian, you're on.
Yeah, good morning. I did, as Brian said, we utilized our financial advisor contract to do this work, to bring in some specialty expertise in economic modeling. And I have from KPMG, Gabriel Catapang here. Gabe, if you could say hello. So Gabe's one of these consultants, has been very devoted to the project since 2015. He's changed employers a couple times, I think, to stay on the project. So we really appreciate Gabe and other folks on our consultant team that do good work for us. So if we go to the next page, in this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about the methodology of a benefit cost analysis, which is different than the economic impact reports we present to the board annually. Go through the benefits, which are a bit different. Talk about the cost, which are known because of the 2023 project update report, and then finally get to the results and the conclusions. Next slide. So, skipping to the end here, I just want to highlight the conclusion that phase one high-speed rail benefits are very substantial and they far exceed the cost at a number of ranges and different analysis levels on discounting and so forth. We did use for this analysis the guidance from the U.S. Department of Transportation and Federal Railroad Administration. They direct that we look at construction and operations for the first 30 years of service. And then after that, they allow us to look at a residual benefit beyond 30 years. But they set a number of directives on how we do this. And really the reason for that is they use it for comparing different grant applications. So they want all applicants to use a similar type of analysis, so it's easier to compare. Next slide. So what a benefit cost analysis is simply is a systematic process for identifying and quantifying and comparing expected societal benefits and cost of a project. And a couple methodological features of this is one, they try to exclude indirect taxes, for example. Some of our construction costs ultimately go in indirect taxes. They try to exclude transfer payments. So it's really looking at the benefits in terms of the societal benefits, and again, exclude those things that might be a benefit transferred from one individual or one entity to another. It does differ from the economic impact analysis, as mentioned, where we do include things like wages and localized economic benefits. The BCA is broader. One thing it differs from a financial analysis is we're not just looking at bottom line dollars coming into and out of the authority. We also consider externalities like environmental benefits and things like that that might not directly be a benefit in dollars, but are estimated as benefits here in the analysis. And then finally, the end result of this is to have a benefit and cost number that's adjusted for inflation and adjusted or discounted for the future. And then we compare the benefits to the cost. The benefits, of course, you hope to be greater than the cost. Benefits divided by cost produce something called a benefit cost ratio, and you want that ratio to be greater than 1. And in our case, it's well above 1. Next slide. I think I've covered most of these already. We did use KPMG to bring in the expertise. We use the FRA and DOT standards. And we will show as we go through this benefit and cost in a couple different bases. There's a basis of nominal or year of benefit, year of cost number. There's also a number of 2021 dollars to take out the effects of inflation. And then we discount by 7%, which is an FRA direction to basically value the short term more than the long term because of time value of money. And also the fact that, there's short term is generally more desirable. And let me expand on that a bit with the next slide. So just to show you the impacts of our adjustments on cost and benefits, it's just an illustration on this page. We look at $1 million coming in 2021, 2030 through 2060. And that $1 million gets discounted quite a bit just for inflation. $1 million today, you don't discount for inflation because we're looking at today's dollars, but when you go out as far as 2060 and look at inflation over the next 40 years, that value is brought down when you look at 2021 dollars to about $315,000. So about a third overall is I say 2/3 of the benefit is cut when you look at adjusting for inflation to 2021 dollars. When you discount, in this case, 7% every year going forward, that reduces the benefit even more dramatically, such that in the 2060 case, $1 million received in benefit in 2060 is valued only at $22,000 today, so about 2%. And that's just sort of background because that discount does end up being significant to the numbers. Next slide. So this is a summary of all the project benefits in nominal dollars, and it's really huge. It's $850 billion. And, we'll compare that to our nominal cost of about 106 billion. But again, in nominal dollars, the benefits are substantial and they're spread across several areas here. And I'll touch on all of the major ones as we go forward. Next slide. So first we start with benefits for those that ride the high-speed rail trains. So over the 30-year period we're looking at, we expect about $1 billion of total hour travel time savings. So for the most part, people are shifting modes from automobiles to high-speed rail. They're saving hours and hours of time. And again, cumulatively over 30 years, it's about $1 billion of travel time savings, and that equates to about $141 billion of future benefits, again, in each year going forward in nominal terms. Reliability is also a major benefit. High-speed rail is more reliable in travel time than traveling by car when you don't know what kind of congestion you might face on the roads, or planes that have delays due to weather and other factors that don't impact high-speed rail to those degrees. So that's a $59 billion benefit. Stations and amenities, those accrue to all the users, not only those that travel on the high-speed rail, but those that might visit our stations for other connecting transit or things like that. That's a $51 billion total benefit. And then on this slide, we end with induced ridership. So these are folks that choose not to travel because there's not a safe, convenient way to go to where they want to travel. But if high-speed rail exists, more trips would be induced, and that's a $27 billion benefit. The next slide. So there's some other transportation benefits that mostly accrue on highways and roads because of the mode shift to high-speed rail from auto trips. There's about a $96 billion mile reduction over the study period. And that has a multitude of benefits. It reduces automobile cost of operations and maintenance by about $98 billion. Highway crash reduction. So based on mileage, death and injury rates, 1,346 fatal crashes would be avoided over this period. About 24,000 injury crashes, et cetera, resulting in about $56 billion in total benefits. Auto and air emission reduction, that comes in about $8 billion. And on the next slide, there's a couple more in this category. The reduced congestion on the roadways, saving travelers time. So that's a $12.5 billion. Airports see some reduced delay because of reduced plane trips versus a no-build high-speed rail scenario, $1.2 billion. A noise and pavement cost, $0.2 billion in total benefits. Next slide. So this is getting at the wider economic benefits of high-speed rail. Studies do show that when good interregional transportation exists, those regions tend to grow faster economically because of things like easier access of employees to employers, better chances to coordinate, cooperate with other firms, other workers, and that efficiency gain mostly accrues to workers in the modeling. So worker wage uplift, about $197 billion, firm productivity uplift measured in higher commercial values near the high-speed rail station, $16 billion. The next slide. Rounding out the benefits here and the adjustments, we also eliminate, I believe, about 100 at-grade crossings of cars passing over rail, and eliminating those crossings has benefits in terms of travel time savings, but also It reduces delays for emergency response like ambulance and fire. And those benefits collectively add up to $68 billion. Freight and passenger rail efficiencies, again, versus the no build scenario, we are reducing burdens on existing freight rail lines, and that has an $18 billion benefit. The last two, residual value, again, the federal methodology has us cutting off the benefits at 30 years for all those things we've gone through so far. But they do allow us to assign a residual value for what would come after the first 30 years of operation. And in this case, it's 177 billion in total benefits. And lastly, the operation and maintenance, repair and rehabilitation cost. Those are items that are, in this case of the model, counted as sort of negative benefits. So they offset the benefits we've gone over. So it's a negative 82 billion, but important to make sure we cover those in the analysis. The next slide. So the cost, as I mentioned, no surprises here really. We pull in the cost from the 2023 project update report. I'll mention we also use the ridership and other data consistent with the 2023 PER. So the base cost of the phase one program, $106 billion. In a later slide, we'll adjust that to take out the indirect taxes, but that's the cost number. Next slide. So to get to the final numbers, the final comparison, again, we convert everything to a base 2021 dollar, and we also apply the discount rate. I did want to mention that while DOT and FRA direct a 7% discount rate be used, that is a bit of a subjective thing. It's an input for consideration of the government, but government could choose to use a 0 discount rate or a 4% or a 12%. The 7% discount rate ties to what pension funds, for example, tend to target in their annual earnings. So some investments may, target a higher rate and look for a net present value that would be higher based on a higher discount rate. But other, as I said, governments may choose to look at investments that also would be built on a lower discount rate of 0 or 4%, meaning that government in that case is valuing future generations equally to how we're valuing the current benefits to this generation. And so at times, certainly governments have decided to invest more now, so future generations see benefits. So again, this is a tool. High-speed rail does very well under a 7% discount rate, but a few slides from now, you'll see that the difference in depending on the discount rate is somewhat dramatic as well. Next slide. So on this slide, we're just showing for each of those items we went through. We started with the $850 billion total benefit in nominal terms. When we adjust it for inflation in 2021 dollars, that takes us to 364 billion. A 4% discount rate would shift that down further to 133 billion. And at the 7% rate, it shifts the benefits to a rate of or level of $70.6 billion. Next slide. So doing the similar thing on the cost side, we take our costs from the PER, we exclude the indirect taxes from that number, gets us to 98.4 billion in nominal terms, and adjusting to 2021 dollars, we're at 76.9 billion and so forth. At a 4% rate, that would be 62 billion cost. At a 7% rate, about $54 billion of adjusted cost. Next slide. So to kind of wrap it up here, we show these different values, again, comparing nominal cost and benefits. High-speed rail has net benefits of about $442 billion. If we adjust for inflation, that would be about 287 billion in net benefits. Applying the various discount rates, net benefits would be 71 or about 17 billion. based on a 7% discount rate. Again, benefits exceed cost in all cases significantly. One thing I just note here for any analysis of this work is it's a very important, of course, not to mix and match your cost and benefits. You know, if you're looking at nominal terms, you want to use the two nominal numbers. If you're looking at the discounted 7% rate, it's important to use that cost and that benefit. And I just maybe for this page mention for what the FRA was looking for in their numbers for what we submitted. Again, we have this net benefit and cost number. Net present value is a metric that comes in at 16.9, and the ratio of 1.32 is the ratio at which the benefits exceed costs. So those are the sort of the key metrics that FRA looks at when they'll analyze the applications. They do have their own experts that look at all the applications and the various applicants' benefit cost ratios to make sure our applicants are doing it on a fair basis. And so we feel we had a good team with KPMG who does this all the time, not just once a year, once every few years, but they have a dedicated team of economists that are very familiar with this and familiar with the DOT metrics. And so we feel we got a good result here. I did want to mention the other reason we're here today is was some interest in this data from the peer review group, and it came up in the state Senate hearing in March. So we wanted the board as well to be aware of this output of this analysis, as I think it'll probably be more widely discussed over time.
Thank you, Mr. Annis. Director Escutia.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. The first question that I have is with regard to your slide dealing with high-speed rail user benefits. And basically in all your modeling, my question is very simple. Does your modeling assume a decrease in ridership?
Yes, it does. So it's based on the 2023 per ridership numbers.
All right. Now, this thing about a discount rate is something that took me by surprise. I have never heard of that. So the question that I have for you is obviously the figures without a discount are obviously very high as compared to the figures with a discount, they are lowered substantially. Is this discount rate what is it? Is it a universally accepted accounting principle?
Well, it's a standard for this type of analysis. I mean, I give the basic principle is if I give you $1 million today, you know what that is. If I say I'll give you $1 million in 30 years, it's worth less to you, right? Because you don't have value of that full amount of money today. So that's the principle of discounting. The other interesting example maybe is the lottery. Lottery winners, sometimes they get to choose from a stream of revenue, or they get a discounted amount all up front. And so, you know, the basic concept is that time value of money, that money in pocket now is worth, or benefit in pocket now is worth more than a benefit in 10 or 40 years. But as I mentioned, as a society, you know, that's not the only thing policymakers may consider. You know, they may look at, you know, preschool. Does preschool have a good net present value at a 7% discount? I don't know, because you invest now, see the benefit later.
So as the federal government is discussing whether they're going to give us federal funds or not, do they go through this analysis of this discount analysis?
They do. So they'll look at all the applicants and they'll compare the ratios that different projects have. So all else being equal, a project with a 1.5 or a 1.0, you know, they would consider the 1.5 to be stronger than the one at 1.0 ratio. So it goes into the analysis.
Okay.
Again, not the only thing that should or is considered.
Well,
but
that's
it's
good
part
to
of the
know. Then
analysis.
finally, in one of your slides, you had a column that had a 4% discount rate and another column that had a 7% discount rate. Which is the one that's universally accepted?
Well, I don't believe there's one that is universally accepted. I think
So
both
it's just
are.
a range.
It's a range. It's, I think, appropriate for, in this case, the grant evaluator being the federal government to pick a number and say, use this number so we can judge all of you applicants on a like basis. But I think another use of net present value could use a different discount rate, just depending on the decision maker or the policy maker and what their objectives are.
Thank you.
Point of clarity on that though, Brian, the FRA is using the 7%, right?
That's right.
Director Schenk?
Oh, thank you. You know, we've talked over the years about the benefits, and this is, I think, the first time that we've really seen it with such clarity and with actual dollar amounts to some important benefits. I'm used to saying cost benefit, but I guess now it's benefit cost, which is okay. My question is, how do we use this to get it out into, you know, a broader audience? For example, at grade rail crossing removal is very real in communities where you're stopped, you know, for a long time trying to get across a rail, a train going by for 15 or 20 minutes. These are important real life benefits that I think are not really known broadly. You know, everybody knows the negative. Everybody has been talking about the negative. What is the plan to get this beyond this room and this presentation?
Well, I think we could certainly consider putting some of this in the next business plan and other avenues of social media that we use, but yeah.
I think also there's elements of this that will move into talking points and leave behind documents that we will use in our advocacy for the federal grant. Again, this is a document that has accompanied our federal grant application. And so these elements now we will use when we go to advocate for the grant and the benefits of this project for that purpose. So I think you'll see it both in talking points, leave behind documents, and of course, it's part of the evaluation.
Well, I don't want to belabor this, but you know, we have very few positive things going for us. I would say that we should do it beyond talking. I mean, it's important to do that. I mean, that's the focus right now. But I'm looking at the broader community of California and the public opinion. And I know we have a communications department, and we ought to come up with a PR, I don't want that sounds pejorative, but with some campaign that the average citizen can know that they're going to get real benefits in their community. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Schenk. Yes, Emily.
This has been an interesting meeting so far. I wanted to commend staff for this. When I got briefed on this report, I was excited about it, and I had the exact same thoughts, and I expressed that to the staff, which is this is really important. It's also a demonstration that despite the setbacks of this project and despite how challenging this project is, it's also transformational for the state and for the country. And this report, well, that's just me, but this report shows, to me, it's just a demonstration that we can't afford not to do this project, that this is aligned with the goals of the state, of the people of this state, and we got to get it done. And these are real benefits. One thing I'll say, representing heavy civil in my day job and being a driver on our highways, a big driver, the lives saved, you know, it's easy to look over that, look at climate, look at all the other things, but the lives saved is real. So I just wanted to thank staff. This is great. And I know that this went to the federal government, and there was a conversation today, a good, robust conversation about what will happen. Will we get this money? Will we not? I think we will. I think we should. I think the state deserves it. I thought the coalition that the staff put together and the information the staff put together was incredibly strong, including this report. And so I was really proud to be a board member when I saw what the staff put together. And I think you will get the money. You should get the money. And I believe in it. So but thank you for this report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Cohen, and we're happy to have you here with us also.
I think that was your first time speaking. Am I mistaken on that?
Yeah.
I have a question for the.
Yes,
board.
Director Williams.
I'm just joking.
CFO Ennis, thank you very much.
Wait, I think there were, Ernie, did you have a question? I did have a question.
I'm sorry, Ernie, I didn't see your hand.
No, I was just going to make a comment about the 7% that we're using, yet the emissions are using CO2 emissions are using the rate of 3%. And I was wondering why the difference.
I'm not sure I know the answer to that. You're speaking of another analysis related
Well,
to carbon.
It's noted on the footnotes there that
Brian, I think it is
carbon
that,
dioxide emissions, which are discounted at 3%. I was just wondering why they're using a 3% discount and what would that effect have if we use 3% rather than the 7%?
and I want to ask, I thought that was how the FRA handled emissions. Isn't that the FRA methodology?
Yes, you saw in the slides, the 7% will give you a lower number versus the 3%. The FRA wants us to value the benefits that we get from GHG reductions higher. It's a way for us to give a higher value to the same benefits. Lower discount rate, higher benefits.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ernie. Thank you, Brian. All right, we're going to move on to agenda item number 4, which is the notice to proceed on number 3 for the Merced to Madera project section. CEO Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to introduce to the board members somebody they've known and seen before, Christine Inouye, who is our chief engineer for strategic delivery. Christine is heading up the team that is overseeing the advanced design work on the Merced and Bakersfield extensions. And she's doing a really great job. What she's about to talk about, I just wanted to set up a little bit with the board members. When the board authorized the staff to move forward on the advanced design work for the Merced extension, you included in that, the first notice to proceed was to move the design work to 30% for the Merced extension. The second part was, and you want us to come back and report to the board when we were ready, but the second part was to extend that design work to the final location of the Merced station. And that at the time was going through an environmental re-exam. So we had to finish that re-exam before we can include that into the design work that the designer is now undertaking. That re-exam completed in April. And with that re-exam done, we're now coming back and asking the board for permission to allow that designer to do the design work all the way to the downtown Merced station. And so that's the NTP3 that's here. And with that, Christine, I'll let you present. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, Chairman Richards and the Board of Directors. I'm Christine Inouye, the Chief Engineer of Strategic Delivery at the High Speed Rail Authority. Today, I will be presenting agenda item number 4. Consider approving notice to proceed for the Merced to Madera, notice to proceed number 3 for the Merced to Madera project section. The authority is recommending approval to issue notice to proceed 3 for the Merced to Madera design services contract. Notice to proceed 3 will result in commencing design services to advance the design and establish the configuration footprint for the Merced station relocation portion of the project. The configuration footprint sets the baseline for future work and drives alignment of critical project elements. The services will include configuration footprint design, a minimum of 30%, value engineering, cost refinements, travel time enhancements, right-of-way mapping, and utility relocation requirements. These are the same design services that are currently underway in the Merced to Madera project. Next slide. In August 2022, the board authorized execution of the Merced to Madera Design Services Contract, NTP 1. The contract term is 2 years, 3 months. So I will continue on slide 5. Thank you. The authority completed an environmental reexamination to relocate the approved at-grade station at Martin Luther King Jr. Way to an elevated station at R Street. The relocation, thank you. The relocation facilitates a combined station with connections to Amtrak San Joaquin and Altamont Corridor Express services, as discussed in Senate Bill 198. The reexamination was completed in April 26, 2023. From the reevaluation under CEQA, no major changes are necessary to the final Merced to Fresno EIR. And under NEPA, the changes were not substantial or significant enough to require a new supplemental EIS or new environmental document. Next slide, please. Now I'm on slide 6. The Merced to Madera design milestones are shown here. The Federal FR Rail Administration granted pre-award approval for the $25 million raise grant in September 2022. Task Order 1 was issued and work began in October. By January, the project management plan was complete. Alignment footprint will be verified in June, and draft configuration footprint is planned for the end of this year. Once this milestone is reached, utility relocations can be completed, or relocation designs can be completed, and preparation for early right-of-way acquisition can be considered. Slide 7. As of April.
Christine, can you mute that computer maybe?
Thank you. As of April.
Mr. Chair, we only have 2 slides left on this presentation. I said we only have 2 slides left on this presentation, and the last one is a summary. So I think and we've all reviewed.
We are about done with this. Is there,
Given the technical difficulties, I just.
yeah. Is it that you're not seeing anything, Christine? You're not seeing?
Go on my.
Oh, your mic's not going.
But
I-
I
yeah.
think I can use this mic and get through.
I'd like
Yes.
to move the item.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I'm sorry, I'm missing your mic is not working at all.
Mic does work.
Had the question
Yeah.
called.
But the
That's first and
Yes.
a second.
All right, well,
Just call the roll.
all right, we call the roll, please.
Director Schenck,
Yes.
Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Camacho. Yes. Vice Chair Miller,
Yes.
Director Perea,
Yes.
Director Gilmetti,
Yes.
Director Escutia, Director Williams,
Aye.
Director Cohen.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And sorry for the IT problems here. We'll now move on to CEO report, and because of some of the loss of time, the CEO is going to shorten his presentation as best he can. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, members. Brian Kelly again, CEO, High Speed Rail. A couple of important things I want to run through in the CEO report. You have hard copies in your binders. The first issue is under the program update. A category was to inform the board of the finalization or the completion of negotiations on the final large change order relative to CP1. And that was the change order at Church Avenue. And that change order was $132.6 million. And the reason for the change order was we had to move forward and complete the design in the document based on what was in the environmental document, and some of the environmental document requirements came in after the award of the contract. And so we had to redesign to that purpose. Also, the city of Fresno had some design changes to the structures. And so we incorporated all of that into the final document and approved that change order. That's the last major change order on CP1. I'm now moving to slide number 7 for the members that are looking at the document. Slide 7, just to update on some legislative activity that I think the board should be aware of. We had 2 legislative hearings, one in March, one in April, on the project update report. Coming out of those, Republican member Vincent Fong carried a bill that attempted to move cap and trade dollars from this project to water-related purposes. That bill was defeated in committee on a partisan vote, 4 in favor and 11 against, and that was AB 501 on April 24th. And the last thing, just for the board's knowledge, is that there is a bill that's moving forward, SB 544, that would continue some of the Bagley-Keene changes that were put in place post-COVID that enables us to have the most flexible possible hearings, including allowing members to come in by Zoom or virtual or whatever. And that bill is continuing to move through the legislative process. So we're monitoring that. Could be part of the budget discussion. But again, seeing everybody in person today, hopefully that's what we continue to do. We want to make sure you're aware of that.
Brian, just a second. I know we're getting feedback. Is everybody being able to hear this, or would you like to?
I think we can hear.
Yeah.
You can hear it good.
Okay. All right. Keep going.
Sometimes when mics are too close, you get the feedback. So maybe that helps, or maybe it doesn't. The other thing I want to jump to in the CEO report, just mention to members next week, some of the management team will be traveling to Washington, D.C. for the National U.S. High-Speed Rail Conference. A couple of us are asked to appear on panels and make presentations about the status of our project and what we're doing. It's also an opportunity to thank members of Congress and others who supported our federal grant application. So we'll be making some rounds to do that as well and talk about the benefits of the program for those that are decision makers on that federal grant program. I think the most important thing left on the CEO report that I want to cover, well, I guess there's 2, but quickly, a couple of meetings ago, Director Perea asked about the status or the next steps on the identification of the location of the heavy maintenance facility in the Central Valley. And I indicated to him that we are about to start the environmental process for that. And so that is, we are executing an RFQ now so we can get the environmental review done. That process will involve calling down 11 different sites to find the most, the project alternative or the best alternative for the program, both operationally and environmentally. And we will come back to the board with that recommendation when the environmental work is done. But that won't be until 2025. So there's some time.
Brian, we're back up.
Right. Thank you. So next slide on
Hey,
this.
Brian, sorry, Mr. Kelly,
Sure.
can I ask you a question about that? Just in terms of, I understand there's the environmental assessment that's going on.
Yep.
The geographic region that you've identified, will there be a further analysis of what is more optimal in terms of like the North Valley versus the south part of that sort of stretch? What will be the thinking and analysis that goes into
So
that?
there are several facilities that we need in the Central Valley, some light maintenance facilities. There's a maintenance away facility that will be in Fresno now, and the Operation Control Center will also be in Fresno. The location of the heavy maintenance facility went through a process where 11 different cities have provided an interest in hosting the site for the heavy maintenance facility. And what the environmental process will do is we will screen the the operational needs for that facility versus each site. And then we'll go through the environmental impacts as we get down to the sites that meet the qualifications to do it. We will then, through that process, come up with a preferred alternative, and we will bring that preferred alternative and the analysis that led to that to the board. So there's a series of criteria that will screen through our operational needs, and then we'll bring the alternative to you all. But again, that's going to take about 18 months. So we're going to be into 2025 when we come back on that.
Brian, quick question. Will
Yes.
that include the evaluation of an interim heavy-duty maintenance facility pending the need for a heavy-duty facility with maximum number of trains?
When you say we'll include the analysis for that, we will, the initial maintenance of way facility and light maintenance facilities that would be part of the initial construction, we won't need a full operational heavy maintenance facility until we're into operations for some time.
Right.
But I don't want to tell you that the environmental analysis on this will evaluate that, because I'm not sure it will. But the reality is we will probably use some of the other interim stations for light maintenance on the trains until we need the heavy maintenance work.
Right.
And that will be later. Okay. And then lastly, just so the board is aware, on a positive note, I always like to end on a positive note. The authority was the recipient on slide 17 now of several recent awards. One is a Public Information Officers Award for some of the graphic work and online work we did with the be able to show people what the alignment would look like from San Francisco to San Jose and San Jose to Merced. So we received an award for that. American Planning Association provided our Northern California team with an award for their outreach on the environmental justice components of our work in the Bay Area and the environmental documents in the Bay Area. And then Women in Transportation Seminar. They've honored us with Employer of the Year in Los Angeles and Sacramento. And we just got the same Employer of the Year from their chapter in the Bay Area. So I'm happy to announce that. And then finally, two last announcements that I think are vitally important. One is WTS International chapter, now covering all of the country and even international, named us the Employer of the Year as well. So I'm happy to announce that. We'll be receiving that award in Atlanta, I think tomorrow. So I'm pleased to announce that. And then lastly, Noah Kelly will be graduating from college on Sunday. I want to make sure that everybody's aware of that. With that, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Brian, just one thing. It would be nice if you let the board know about some of these conferences. Some of us might,
Sure.
some of us might want to attend
We talked with the chair.
on our own dime, of course,
Yeah.
but you know.
We talked a little bit with the chair about this one, but also talked about putting together a Washington trip later in the year.
Okay.
Not necessarily tied to a conference, but tied to work on.
Okay. But just let us know when
Sure.
there's a conference. Some of us go back east and we knew we would attend. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Miller. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to just give you about 1 minute for you and the board. As I pointed out earlier, we'll not have a Finance and Audit Committee meeting today, but just to give you some of the highlights that would have been in that meeting. With regards to cash, the authority, again, these numbers are all as of March 31st of 23. Total cash available is 3.2 billion, of which 1.2 is Proposition 1A, and cap and trade is roughly 1.9. That is the majority of everything. There's only about 11.2 million in the real property account. Sales of Proposition 1A bonds, 1.1 billion in cash at the end of March, as I pointed out. The cap and trade auction proceeds in February are not reflected in the cash that I indicated earlier, cap and trade being about 1.9 billion. The estimate of what that may look like when announced would be about 220 billion to the authority. The admin budget in the month of March, we spent $5.9 million in March year over year. That's 631,000 higher than the previous year. The reason for that, for the most part, is the fulfilling of 52 vacant positions. The capital outlay budget, that is expenditures in the month of March, expenditures were 98.1 million. Of that, 69.8 or roughly 70 million were from design build. Preliminary numbers for April would indicate about a 22% increase on overall expenditures and about a 10% increase in the design build contracts. The contingent summary for the authority at the end of March, there's 2.1 billion in remaining contingency, specifically for construction packages. That includes the augmentation that was approved by the board in March. Utility relocations, you've already heard from from one of the, in the construction update report, and also right-of-way. So I'll not reflect those at this point. At this point, then, we have completed the public portion of this meeting. The board is now going to go into closed session. After that closed session, I'll come back and announce anything, if there's that to the public, if there was anything that needed to be reported at this point. But with that, we'll go into closed session. I don't have an exact time for what this might be. I would say that probably an hour and a half, perhaps. So if it looks like it's going to be at or around that amount of time or longer, we'll ask somebody to come out and let you know, for those of you who are waiting, and those of you who might be still on the call-in, or not the call-in, but on the Zoom. Thank you. I'm happy I forgot the word Zoom. So anyway, we'll now move to closed session. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the California High-Speed Rail Authority Board of Directors meeting. I have just returned from closed session. There is nothing to report. This closed session will be continued after our next board meeting in June. So the closed session will be continued at that board meeting next month. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone next month. The meeting is now adjourned.